Julius Caesar. One man, one shattered world order. Let's get right into this explainer.
Okay, no slow build today. We are jumping straight into the action. This is the story of the ultimate political survivor and absolute military mastermind. We're talking about a figure whose sheer ambition was so gravitational, it literally pulled an entire 500-year-old republic into a black hole of civil war, only to emerge on the other side as an empire. Every single move he made was a massive calculated risk that constantly leaves you asking, what in the world is he going to do next?
Part 1. The ambitious survivor, dodging death and defying pirates. To understand how he broke the system, we really have to start with how it tried to break him. See, Caesar's life started with a huge gamble. During a brutal civil war in his youth, the ruthless dictator Sulla was just purging his enemies from Rome. Caesar flat out refused to divorce his wife to appease the dictator, lost his priesthood, and was forced into hiding. Now, Sulla eventually pardoned him, but allegedly muttered this terrifying quote he saw in Caesar many Mariuses, referring to a previous wildly disruptive populist general. Sulla knew, right then and there, that this young man was an incredibly dangerous threat. But just look at the sheer audacity on this timeline. Forced out of Rome, he heads east and gets captured by pirates. They demand a ransom, and he doesn't panic. Actually, scratch that, it's wilder. He jokes with them, tells them they aren't asking for nearly enough money, and promises he'll come back and crucify them all. He gets the ransom paid, but then immediately hunts the pirates down and sells them into slavery or executes them. I mean, this is the baseline level of ruthlessness we're dealing with here.
Part 2. Conquering the ancient world, the Gallic Wars. So to actually take over Rome, he needed a fiercely loyal, battle-hardened army forged in blood. Check out the data here. You can see his absolute dominance across the map, ruthlessly conquering Gaul, which is modern-day France, and crushing absolutely any opposition that stood in his way. At Alesia, he literally built 2 walls around a fortress, one to keep the besieged army in and another to keep the relieving army out. He fought in 2 directions at the exact same time and won. These achievements were completely unprecedented. Combined with his veteran army, it created this terrifying suspense back in Rome. I mean, he achieved the impossible. He even built a massive wooden bridge across the Rhine River in just 10 days, marched his army across, intimidated the Germanic tribes, and then tore the whole thing down just to prove he could. It created this agonizing tension at home. What is this unstoppable force going to do next? Part 3. The ultimate gamble, crossing the Rubicon. Well, by 50 BC, his former ally Pompey and the Roman Senate ordered Caesar to relinquish his command, lay down his weapons, and step down. But instead of surrendering to certain political ruin, he just pushes all his chips to the center of the table. He utters the famous words, "the die is cast," and illegally crosses the Rubicon River into Italy. He essentially hits the detonator on the Republic and kicks off a massive civil war. The speed of what happens next is just staggering. He rapidly drives Pompey out of Italy, chases him all the way across the Mediterranean, and crushes his forces in Greece at Pharsalus. Then, without missing a single beat, he tracks Pompey to Egypt, arbitrates the Egyptian civil war, survives a brutal siege in Alexandria, and installs Cleopatra on the throne. He is constantly escalating the stakes and consolidating total control. And just to prove how effortless this was all becoming for him, after wrapping things up in Egypt, he heads to Asia Minor to put down a rebellion and drops one of the most legendary one-liners in military history. This phrase announced his lightning-fast, total victory over the kingdom of Pontus at the Battle of Zela in August 47 BC. Veni, vidi, vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. You know, it wasn't just a military update. It was a devastating flex. It was Caesar flat out telling Rome, I am entirely in a league of my own. Part 4. Absolute power, dictator for life. Having defeated all foreign and domestic enemies, Caesar returned to a functionally dead republic. First things first, he bought immense, unwavering loyalty. He gave each of his veteran soldiers 24,000 sesterces. To put that in perspective, that was literally a lifetime's worth of pay. He staged massive triumphs, threw lavish games for the public, and pardoned many of his former enemies, really leaning into this image of a benevolent, untouchable ruler. But notice how these unprecedented honors built into an undeniable, downright terrifying reality for the Senate. He was accepting tributes that looked exactly like divine monarchy. His face was the very first of a living Roman to appear on a coin. He sat on a literal golden chair. They renamed a month after him, which, by the way, is why we still have the month of July today. And finally, in early 44 BC, he was appointed dictator perpetuo, dictator for life.
This intense concentration of absolute power pushed the tension to a total breaking point for those who cherished the older republic. To the Roman elite, king was a toxic, strictly forbidden word. The suspense in the Senate was absolutely suffocating. They knew they had to act before his power became completely permanent.
Part 5. The Ides of March, the fall of the dictator. So Caesar's final fatal bet was dismissing his bodyguard, honestly believing his enemies were completely pacified. But on March 15th, in a sudden, brutal shock, the dictator for life was swarmed by a conspiracy of senators and stabbed to death in the theater of Pompey. They killed him to prevent a Roman kingdom, totally convinced they were saving the republic and restoring freedom. But here is the most addictive, mind-blowing twist of this entire history. Ironically, the conspiracy utterly failed to save the Republic. The Roman people didn't cheer, they rioted. This assassination plunged Rome right back into a vicious series of civil wars, permanently destroying the constitutional government and directly paving the way for Caesar's teenage heir, Octavian, to crush the assassins and become the very first Roman emperor, Augustus. Part 6. An immortal legacy, the name that became an empire. By striking him down, the Senate didn't erase him. His influence only multiplied, literally becoming the foundation of empire itself. Just look at this incredible transition. His name was so powerful, it completely transcended Rome. The family name Caesar morphed into the literal title for absolute rulers for the next 2 millennia. The German Kaiser, that's Caesar. The Russian Tsar, that's Caesar. He became the global synonym for supreme power. And his playbook? It never went out of style. From Napoleon Bonaparte to Mussolini, history's most ambitious populists and strongmen have modeled themselves directly on the explosive template he left behind. The whole idea of the charismatic strongman overriding a failing system by force is still known today as Caesarism. Over 2,000 years later, the sheer gravity of his actions still commands global fascination. If you go to the Roman Forum today, right now, there are fresh flowers lying on the ruins of his altar, daily tributes to a man who lived and died over 20 centuries ago. His ambition broke the ancient world, but it leaves us with one haunting question to think about. If his murder only ensured his absolute global legacy, did his enemies truly defeat him, or did they just make him immortal?